Superior kept stealing my work, so made him look stupid and crazy. So I do data analysis for financial firms. I'm based in Europe, but I get a new line manager from America. Now I get on really well with my American colleagues, but this guy is an asshat. Not sure how he got promoted to his position, as he knew nothing about the industry. I frequently had to present to the board, and he'd always go through my slides beforehand and ask me about them. He'd then ask purposefully challenging questions about things he'd only just learnt from 5 minutes before the meeting. Really dickish behavior. Once I realized what he was doing, I started being more careful about how much I shared. One time I managed to plant questions that made him look stupid in front of the board. Following, started making me present to him beforehand, and then would take my presentation and deliver himself to take the credit. This really pissed me off, so I took my petty revenge. For the next meeting, I included a few slides in the PowerPoint that were not connected to the presentation. I was able to quickly skip through these when I was going through it with him, so he didn't pick them up. However, once he got in the meeting, the fun began. The board were very surprised to see a picture of a baby kangaroo in the middle of the projected Q3 earnings. He got flustered and blundered through the next few slides. He was just getting back on track, but then the regional analysis appeared on the bare chest of Tom Brady. The board visibly annoyed at this point, and they thought he was joking around. It all settled down until the final slide. It was the standard, any questions? Only the faded picture in the background just happened to be a bikini pic of the CEO's daughter taken from her Instagram. How did that get there? Asshat quickly made his apologies and left. He came gunning for me, so I had to play. I don't know how that happened. It was all fine when we went through it before. Must be a hacker. Luckily, Sergeant Hithead bought this excuse, as he knows nothing about anything. The board, however, weren't so forgiving and immediately transferred him to a more junior position. 6 months later, I got promoted the role he had vacated. Tossed a guy's wallet in the trash and cashed his money order. So many years ago, late 80s, when I was in high school, my friend Justin and I, 17/18, were going to the county fair and were taking his little sister Heather, 14, along. Well, my older brother and his buddy, both 21, found our and asked us if they could get a ride. Well, we all piled into my old '64 Ford Fairlane and headed off to the fair. As Heather was already in the car, she sat in the back seat by the window, my brother in the middle, Andy's friend, Chester, by the other back window. This was my first time meeting Chester, but he seemed to be a jerk, like my brother. They went off and did their own thing at the fair, and me and friend Andy's little sis had a great time. Now when it was time to leave, Heather ended up in the middle of the back seat between my brother and Chester. My brother and his friend were a bit tipsy, and at tone point, I noticed in the rear view mirror that Chester had put his arm around Heather and was whispering to her. We dropped my brother and Chester off shortly after at a bar. I didn't confront him at the time, as Chester was quite a bit bigger than me and my brother was quite mean and picked on me a lot, and at that age I was still scared of him. When I dropped off Justin and Heather, I asked her if she was okay, as she was very quiet and seemed upset. She said Chester was shitting on her and said some very creepy things to her. I apologized to her and asked her if I should tell someone. She said no, it really just creeped her out, but he didn't touch her anywhere inappropriately or something along those lines. Well, when shutting the back door, I noticed a wallet on my back seat, and wouldn't you know it, it was Chester's. So I look inside, and there's about 15 in cash and an unsigned money order for $600. An hour later, my brother and his friend came and frantically searched my car, and when asked, I said no, I didn't see any wallet. Well, a few days later, my friend and I took that money order and were able to cash it. Chester apparently tried to go to the place he got the money order to get it replaced, but as he had paid cash but didn't have the receipt, it was also in the wallet. They told Hiva was out of luck. Not many computers back then, so he was just out of luck. It WS for his rent. In the end, we split it with Heather and everyone was happy. Except for Chester.
Screw me? No, screw you. First time posting, so please excuse anything out of whack. I do not give permission to any part of this story to be used anywhere. Seriously, don't use it. And #X200B. I live in a very landlord-friendly area, Miami, where rent is beyond ridiculous and practices are shady. The last place we lived was a small 2/1 duplex. Lived there for over 4 years before landlord got greedy and decided he wanted to raise our rent by an additional $700 a month. We had been having issues with the place falling apart for the last 2 years and nothing being done about it. By law, he needed to give us a written notice of the increase 30 prior to it going into effect, and told him so. Don't hear anything back from him. Instead, he immediately filed an eviction for non-payment. We were not adding the extra money. We didn't ever know he had filed it against us until almost 2 months later, since he never posted anything like a notice to us and stopped answering us back. He even closed his bank account that we sent rent payments to. Tried to fight it. Paid the rent directly to court, in the end, but had to be out of there. Judge didn't even let us speak. Not only lose our 3-month deposit, we lost everything paid to the courts as well. It was a rough 2 weeks scrambling to find a place to live and come up with a new deposit. We ended up finding an amazing new place, so happy ending for us. But, I'm angry. I did not need the added stress in my life. This is when I come to find out this duplex is all under illegal construction. No permits. Shared utilities. Big no-no. Other massive illegal jobs done incorrectly own the property. So, I decided to contact the county. Filed a report. Forgot about it. Weeks later, we hear that a county inspector showed UPand has now fined him thousands of dollars and he will continue to be fined daily until everything is fixed. He can't even sell the place until it's done. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned.
Traffic cones of doom. At a previous rental house, there was an old gravel, dirt access road that cut between my house and my neighbors, and the 2 houses behind us that faced the next street over. I think it was a remnant of the old neighborhood and the city never paved it. It was barely wide enough for a car. No one knew whose property it belonged to. No one really used it except for spare parking during the holidays. It was also a safe place for our kids, neighbors' kids, to play on bikes and such. At some point, a guy in a Tahoe found it and started using it as a shortcut from my street to the next street over instead of going all the way down the street to the stop sign, which saved him all of 45 seconds. Never saw him parked anywhere in my neighborhood. He just came through a few times a week. Wouldn't have been a big deal, but he liked to floor it, kick up gravel, and go as fast as possible right between our houses. My neighbor bought a couple of small traffic cones and placed them halfway up the road so you'd have to do a slow wiggle to get around them in a vehicle. Couple of days go by and she comes with her traffic cones, which had been obliterated, and says she saw the same guy run them over. I go out and buy a couple of more cones, maybe 18 inches tall, and an 80-pound bag of concrete. Flipped the mover, stopped up the tops of the cones with duct tape and filled them to the brim with concrete. Once they dried, I put the 2 40-pound cones in the same places my neighbor had hers, and let the neighbors know what was up. Unfortunately, I missed it, but my neighbor didn't. Tahoe boy did his usual gravel spin-out and absolutely nailed one of my cones. The orange plastic was burst open and the concrete was in 3 big chunks. She heard the impact and saw him get out, check his vehicle and drive away. I never saw him again after that, but I like to think I left a reminder on his vehicle to not Dukes of Hazzard a tiny access road in between houses.
Make a meme about X using our selfie and share it with your friends? Oops, I forgot what I promised. I'm 52F. He's 48. July 2022, we met through friends, his best friend being brothers with my superior coworker. I don't really have a friendship with her, but I guess she's alright. We went on a couple of dates and decided to have X and begin a relationship. That's when he took her selfie. We had X. X was great. Next date, he showed me the meme that was similar. Packers pummel bears, that he said he showed Tohi's friends. Cringe. I'm too mature for that. That morning, he woke up and asked if I had any whiskey to put in his coffee. No. So he suddenly made an excuse that he was talking his adult kids to brunch and he'd call me later. He didn't call. I didn't call him. A couple of days later, he called, confiding that he got a DUI that Sunday, and that he lied to me. He didn't fave brunch. He went to a bar and got a DUI at 4 p.m. I politely immediately broke up with him and he begged me to keep the DUI to myself. I agreed. Because I'm an adult. Last week, my coworker came by and said, "OMG. I just found out you dated." I said, "I'd hardly call it dating." I broke up with him right after that DUI. She dropped her papers and slammed her hands on my desk, shouting, "What? What? You've got to becketing me." He didn't tell any of us. Ha ha ha, oops. Petty revenge on a platter, and I didn't even mean to. Best night of tips ever? I worked for at a hotel that did upscale weddings for about 2 years as a bartender. The head bartender was a pretentious middle-aged Rick Onda was BFF with this 19-year-old college kid. They would always be the first bartenders to leave events, so I would be stuck late by myself to do all the cleanup and paperwork. Eventually, I had asked for a specific night to leave early because I thought I had a good shot at getting laid. Guess who left early? So I plotted my revenge. We had designated people who would assist as barbacks with ice, restocking liquor, and a couple other tasks during our shifts, and we would tip them like 10% of our tips. I made like $200 or $300 that night, which was pretty standard, but I tipped her $120 that night. Far more than I was supposed. And guess who had lots of questions the next night? How did you do last night? They never asked that before, but I said, sorry, I don't remember, I think it was a good night. They hounded me that shift and finally said, we know how much you tipped the bar back. I said that the bar back had to help me a lot because it got busy after they left too early, and I tipped them what I thought they deserved. They started demanding a cut of the tips, but I told them we never did that before and that it was customary that the last bartender got all the remaining tips. They were losing their hit because they thought I cleared $1, $200 that night, and they missed out. I was called to the department manager's office the next day. I made sure to tell him about it. Never shared tips like they were demanding and don't know why they think I made so much. It was a bit touchy at times, but he ended up agreeing with me. I didn't tell him what I did at first because I wanted to make sure he wasn't going to try and get me to give my tips to them in the future. I finally told him about them always being the ones that got to leave early and took my night I had requested to leave early and leaving me during high-volume time to fend for myself when they left, and about how I intentionally gave my own money to the bar back to set them up. He loved it, and the head bartender got in trouble.